Welcome to Tom's Messiaen vlog, episode 12. This is actually episode 11.5 if you like. It's a sequel to episode 11, so if you've not seen that, go and have a look, and then you'll know where this is all coming from. Because we're going to zoom out a bit today. It's a sort of... I've gone down a rabbit hole to find a Nightingale. You'll see what I mean in a minute. But I was struck in movement 8 of the Livre de Saint-Sacrement, which I talked about in the last episode. I was struck by the Nightingale which sings, and particularly with the fact that it sings also in movement 4 of Messe le Pontico, a piece I've played goodness knows how many times, and yet I hadn't noticed that there's this resonance, because both pieces, although separated by decades, both pieces cover similar theological ground, and there's the Nightingale in both of them. So I wondered if that was a significant thing. I wondered if I'd noticed something, because I hadn't read that it was of any particular importance, but I was just intrigued. Anyway, I've had the opportunity to speak to Christopher Dingle, one of the leading Messiaen scholars, and although the conversation wasn't primarily about nightingales, I took the opportunity to ask. Quick disclaimer, I don't intend to make any errors, mistakes, or misrepresent anything in this vlog, but if I do, it's wholly my fault, nothing to do with Christopher Dingle, any of the other authors whose work I've read, or Messiaen himself. It's wholly my fault. So I just wish to exonerate the whole of humanity. Any mistakes I make, which I promise not to, but just in case, are mine. So, nightingales. What on earth? The nightingale was a bird that Messiaen could identify early on in his ornithological journey, if you could put it like that. It was a bird that he... one of the first birds he knew, basically. One of the first bird songs he knew. Thus, it's not entirely surprising that it turns up in Messe le Pontico, because in Messiaen bird music terms, it's quite an early piece. However, there's more to be said. The Nightingale appears also in movement 5 of the Transfiguration, and in that context it also feels significant. It's the only bird in the movement, for example, played on the piano in that instance. By the way, I'm not going to recommend a book today. I'm going to recommend that you go and listen to the Transfiguration. It's flipping fantastic, glorious piece. Anyway, the Nightingale sings. Is there a theological accord between the two organ pieces I've talked about and that movement from the Transfiguration? Well, not directly, but all three of them, one way or another, are dealing with the idea of intimacy with, or closeness to, God, Jesus. So there's a connection there, perhaps. But the point is, all three are peaceful movements, and then the Nightingale sings, and maybe in those moments Messiaen is... Does it represent the Holy Spirit? I mean, Messiaen doesn't say, but it feels significant. So really what I'm sharing with you is it's not just in a couple of organ pieces that the Nightingale appears to have an importance, at least at that moment. Something else to say is I had a question last time. I wondered whether perhaps an explanation for the Nightingale cropping up in the two pieces that I was talking about, perhaps it's just simply that the Nightingale was a bird that Messiaen felt comfortable with and could improvise with quite freely. It was just one that was in his subconscious and could come out of his fingers quite easily. Well, there might be something in my little theory there, because there is actually a recording of Messiaen improvising at La Trinité, a liturgical improvisation. We don't have a date for it, we don't know exactly what sort of service it was or where in the service, but nevertheless there's this recording of Messiaen improvising liturgically, independently of the Livre de Saint-Sacrement or the Messe le Pontico, and he uses a nightingale. So, like I say, maybe there's something in my thinking about the improvisation aspect, bearing in mind that movement 8 of the Livre de Saint-Sacrement grew directly out of improvisation, and Messe le Pontico was certainly inspired by Messiaen's improvising after the war. And indeed before, I guess, but yeah. So the Nightingale therefore plays a role in Messiaen's improvising independently of those two pieces, it would seem. So we have the Nightingale being an early bird, a bird that Messiaen knew early on, a bird which Messiaen sometimes uses at significant moments, it seems, a bird which he improvises with at times, independently of any of his composing, or seemingly independently of it. And there's a fourth category of Nightingale appearance in Messiaen's work, a fourth thing to flag up, and that's that sometimes, frankly, it just sings amongst other birds in his music and doesn't apparently have any significance of its own. An example is the big piano piece, La Fauvette de Jardin. There's a nightingale in there amongst other birds, so you know it's not in and of itself important, it would seem. So that's the role of the Nightingale, and there's a little connection actually with one of Messiaen's chords, which I want to share with you. Messiaen was very helpful. He was very open about his compositional processes in many ways, happy to be interviewed, happy to write stuff down at great length, describing everything that he was doing on the face of it. Of course, there's so much he didn't say, which is one of the things that makes him fascinating. But he did codify and describe a lot of his techniques and give names to things. And one of those things was the total chromatic chord. Now, I say that, total chromatic chord, it sounds like it's going to be a block of 12 notes. It's not quite. All 12 notes are there, but they appear in two parts, if you like. So the first stage with a total chromatic chord is an 8-note chord that's founded on a second inversion major triad with a minor sixth. I need to pull out a stop, don't I? Another 4 notes over the top will give you your 8. And often that will be sustained, and over the top come the other 4 notes, often presented as sevenths, or in this particular instance, a 7th and a 9th. And those 4 notes represented for Messiaen, they're secondary harmonics as far as he was concerned. That's that. I mean, I'll leave you to go and research his theory there. But so we have 8 notes and 4 notes. So it sounds like 2 chords, it's actually 1, and of course there are many instances in the piano music, for example, where those first 8 notes will be sustained and then the other 4 will go over the top, so it does form 1 chord. That example I just played to you there is from the very first line of movement 13, the 2 walls of water, which I told you about. I described that piece to you a few episodes ago. So you can go back and look at, I think it was episode 10, to learn more about that movement. But there are other examples of the total chromatic chord in Livre de Saint-Sacrement, not least in movement 6, and here it's slightly different. We have the 8-note chord sustained on a string stop, and the 4 notes are played on a 4-foot stop in the pedals. I'm not sure I'm going to make this audible or not on this organ now, so let me just try. But just so you know, it's movement 6 of the Livre de Saint-Sacrement, and if you've got the same score I have, it's page 38 that it turns up, and also page 43. And in this instance, the additional 4 notes are presented as a 5th and then an augmented 4th. So the 7ths, which you'd normally get, or the 7ths and 9ths, are sort of presented horizontally, if you like. So here's what it sounds like. So what's that got to do with nightingales? Well, simply that the nightingale sort of gets adapted into that chord, into that harmony. If you think about it, the nightingale that sings in movement 8 of the Livre de Saint-Sacrement it has oscillating 7ths in it. And so, because the second group of 4 notes in the total chromatic chord is often built of 7ths, you can sort of oscillate them, and it refers to the nightingale, if you like. I don't fully, if I'm sounding vague, it's because I don't completely, what I don't grasp is whether there was sort of a moment of decision or whether it's just a process of evolution. I suspect the latter. But certainly you can find examples of the Nightingale song and the total chromatic chord appearing at the same time. I don't think there's an example in the organ music as it happens, but certainly that piano piece I mentioned earlier on, La Fauvette de Jardin, if you look in detail at the Nightingale songs in that piece, you'll find the total chromatic chord turns up, and again, as I've described, you have the first 8 notes sustained, and then the remaining 4 notes are a split, if you like, to provide the oscillation to reference the shape of the Nightingale song. Is that remotely clear? I hope so. Anyway, there we go. So I went down a rabbit hole seeking a nightingale, and as I say, my one remaining question is why, apropos the total chromatic chord and the nightingale. Is it just convenience? Is it evolution? If I get an answer, I'll let you know as a postscript to a future episode. But for now, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.